The diner hummed with the familiar morning hustle. Yet for Claire Weston, it felt like just another draining shift. Gratuities were scarce, financial obligations were accumulating, and her mother's healthcare costs were overwhelming her. She mustered a smile as she neared the final customer at table 7, a billionaire CEO, James Calloway, a man whose visage adorned the covers of magazines. As she poured his coffee, her gaze caught something that sent her heart racing. Adorned on his forearm, in graceful cursive, was a name. Her mother's name is known. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Her heartbeat throbbed. She had never encountered this man before. What's the reason behind it? What led to her mother's name being permanently etched on his skin? Before we dive in, please give this video a thumbs up and let us know your location in the comments. Your support enables us to share more impactful narratives. Let us commence. Claire Weston glided between tables, expertly balancing a tray of coffee cups and plates, a testament to her extensive experience in the bustling world of service. The morning hustle at Mel's Diner unfolded just like it always did. Patrons are restless, coffee requests seem infinite, and gratuities hardly suffice for even a modest grocery trip. Yet today, Claire felt the weight of her exhaustion more than ever. The previous night, a pile of envelopes had come, each one a stark reminder of her mother's medical expenses, demanding payment that was beyond her reach. The figure at the bottom of the bill constricted her chest, a stark reminder that despite her relentless efforts, it was always insufficient. With a weary smile fixed on her face, she approached table 7. A solitary figure occupied a booth, clad in a tailored suit that felt incongruous in the humble setting of a small-town diner. James Calloway. His visage graced the cover of Forbes countless times, far beyond her ability to tally. A billionaire CEO with a business empire that encompassed industries Claire could hardly grasp. She had only ever encountered men like him on television or in magazines, never in a booth at Mel's, casually stirring sugar into his coffee like anyone else. She extended her hand toward the coffee pot, pouring more into his cup while her gaze momentarily drifted to his forearm, causing her breath to hitch. Her mother's name was inked there. Not merely the name, but the precise spelling, the distinctive manner in which her mother had always inscribed it. Eleanor Weston, elegantly inscribed in graceful cursive. Claire felt her heart racing in her chest. Her fingers clenched the coffee pot, her thoughts racing to comprehend the scene unfolding before her. An explanation was necessary. A rationale for why the most influential businessman in the nation bore her mother's name etched upon his skin. Yet, everything felt utterly incomprehensible. James Calloway seemed to sense her uncertainty as he looked up. Intense azure eyes locked onto hers, examining her with a subtle intrigue. She swiftly turned her eyes away, compelling herself to act as if everything was fine. Yet her hands shook as she placed his check down. She had to inquire. She had to find out. What prompted you to initiate that discussion? She took a step back, heart pounding. Her mother had never spoken of being acquainted with anyone like James Calloway. Their connection seemed illogical, yet that tattoo was undeniably more than mere chance. Simply couldn't be. With a determined effort, Claire pushed past the tightness in her throat and spoke up. "Excuse me, I hope this isn't too intrusive, but could you explain why your arm bears my mother's name as a tattoo?" As soon as she spoke, an eerie hush enveloped the space around them. James Calloway remained still, his response delayed. He appeared neither shocked nor confused. Instead, he placed his coffee cup down with precision, his expression a mystery. He remained silent for an extended period. At last, he raised his gaze to meet hers, his voice calm and unwavering. "Did you know Eleanor Weston?" Claire felt a sudden jolt in her stomach. The manner in which he uttered her mother's name suggested familiarity, as if it were not the first time he had encountered it. It felt more like an echo of familiarity than the mere recitation of inked phrases. It felt as if a memory was surfacing, as if someone who had once been close to her was recalling their shared moments. Claire's heartbeat thundered in her ears. This was unachievable. Her mother could never have belonged to the realm of James Calloway. She had devoted her life to teaching, a retired educator who had woven her existence into the fabric of this town. She is my mother, Claire murmured. A fleeting expression crossed James Calloway's face. Astonishment, skepticism, and then an emotion that runs much deeper. At last, there was a gentle warmth in his eyes. "Please take a seat," he instructed. "There is a truth you have yet to uncover." Claire's breath was quick and erratic. Every instinct whispered to her that whatever he was about to reveal would alter the course of everything. She slid the chair out from the table, her palms damp as she held onto the edge with a tight grip. James inhaled deeply, his gaze lingering on the tattoo etched on his arm for a considerable time before he finally broke the silence. "This moment has been a long time coming for me." Claire's grip on the table's edge intensified, her mind swirling with a torrent of questions. What connection did a billionaire like James Calloway have with her mother? What was the reason behind the tattoo of her name on his arm? What was it about Claire that made him gaze at her, as if she held the key to a question he had long sought to answer? James let out a slow breath, his face betraying no emotion. He was a figure who dominated boardrooms, making billion-dollar decisions with unwavering confidence. In this moment, he appeared nearly uncertain. "Your mother," he started, his voice now softer, "was more than just Eleanor Weston to me. She was a person to whom I owed my very existence." Claire's breath hitched. That was completely nonsensical. Her mother was an educator, a dedicated woman who devoted years to evaluating assignments, preparing meals, and ensuring Claire had all she required. She had never brought up the fact that she knew a billionaire, much less that she had saved his life. "You're wrong," Claire replied swiftly. "My mother has spent her entire life in this town. She was never meant to be here," James interjected softly, "and neither was I." Claire's brow furrowed, her heart racing. The gravity of his words coiled within her, stirring a tumult in her stomach. She had anticipated a peculiar coincidence, perhaps a faint link, but this seemed far too significant. James surveyed the diner, keenly ensuring that no ears were prying into his thoughts. The clinking of coffee cups and the murmur of conversation surrounded them. Yet in that instant, it seemed as if the universe had shrunk to encompass only the two of them. He confessed that he was not always James Calloway, and your mother, she was not always Eleanor Weston. Claire dismissed the idea with a shake of her head. "That is completely illogical." A melancholic smile graced his features. "It certainly will, but attentive listening is essential." He leaned in, his intense blue gaze fixed firmly on hers. 3.5 decades ago, your mother was my savior. I was a wanderer, a youth adrift, lacking direction, devoid of prospects, stripped of optimism. She discovered me on the streets, famished, in despair, and she took an action that no one else had ever taken. She provided assistance to me. Claire felt a constriction in her throat. "She welcomed me," James went on, his voice heavy with an emotion Claire struggled to identify. "She provided me with nourishment, she bestowed upon me an identity, and for a brief moment, she offered me a place to belong." Claire struggled for breath. None of this had ever been revealed to her by her mother. "That isn't possible," she murmured. "My mother would have shared her wisdom with me." James gave a slight shake of his head. "Figures she would not possess." Silence lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of unexpressed realities. Claire's hands shook slightly as she absorbed his words. Claire's mother had consistently shown kindness, instilling in her the importance of aiding those who require assistance. Yet to welcome an outsider? To transform his existence so profoundly that her name would remain etched on his skin for years to come? What is the reason behind this? At last, Claire posed the question. What could possibly motivate her to hide this? James's demeanor grew somber. She was looking out for me. Claire felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. From where? James paused, selecting his words with precision. There are aspects of my history, elements of her history, that I cannot share with you in this moment. He surveyed the diner once more, a hint of unease etching itself into his expression. Not at this moment. Claire's heart raced. There was additional information, endless possibilities. Come with me, James said, his voice steady yet gentle. I have something to share with you. Claire's initial reaction was to decline. This was absolutely wild. Yet a quiet voice within her insisted that this was the truth. This was not a mere prank. This was genuine. And if she chose to leave at this moment, the truth might remain forever out of reach. To what destination are we headed? She inquired, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. James rose, placing a pristine $100 bill on the table. A place your mother always hoped you'd avoid. Claire paused, her gaze fixed on the $100 bill resting on the table, as if it were tangible evidence that this entire moment truly existed. Every instinct within her urged caution. She had just crossed paths with James Calloway, and now he was inviting her to step out of the diner with him to reveal some hidden truth about her mother. Yet, she couldn't shake the thought of the tattoo. Her mother's name, indelibly etched on his arm. No one took that action for someone deemed unimportant. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her purse and eased out of the booth. James remained silent, yet his demeanor suggested an unspoken understanding, as if he anticipated her next move. Perhaps that was the most peculiar aspect. Claire found herself drawn to him for reasons she couldn't quite articulate, yet there was an undeniable pull within her. As they ventured outside, the gentle warmth of the evening air enveloped them. The distant city lights danced like stars, yet James guided her toward a polished black car waiting by the curb. The driver, a man in his 40s with keen eyes, acknowledged James with a nod before he opened the door. Claire came to a halt. Where are we headed? James gestured towards the vehicle. A place you must experience. Her heart raced. That does not provide a solution. James let out a weary sigh, his hand brushing thoughtfully over his jaw. This location is connected to the histories of both our mothers. Your questions will be answered. Claire cast her eyes down the street. She had the option to turn around, step back into the diner, and act as if none of this had ever occurred. Yet she was aware that she wouldn't. She had to find out. In silence, she gracefully entered the car. James trailed behind as the driver eased away from the curb. The quiet lingered in the air as the city flowed past beyond the glass. Claire cast a fleeting look at James. He appeared lost in contemplation, his eyes locked onto a far-off spot beyond the horizon. At last, she found her voice. Share with me the story of my mother. The genuine narrative. James let out a breath. She was the most resilient individual I have ever encountered. When I encountered her, I was merely a frightened youth, devoid of any prospects. She provided nourishment, a safe haven, and instilled in me the hope that I could achieve greater things. Claire took a deep breath. What was the reason she never mentioned you to me? James clenched his jaw. She aimed to shield you from the reality. A shiver coursed through Claire. What is the truth regarding? James paused for a moment, then pivoted to meet her gaze. Claire, your mother was more than merely a school teacher. She had a formidable adversary, one who relentlessly pursued her without pause. Claire felt a knot in her stomach. Who is it? James's lips formed a tight, straight line. A man who shattered lives for his own amusement. A man who stripped away all that I held dear. Claire's breath caught in her throat. He remains out there, doesn't he? James hesitated before responding. He simply gazed at her, and within that quiet moment, Claire understood. The vehicle decelerated, veering onto a hidden path. Dark silhouettes of trees flanked both sides, reaching out into the night. At last, they came to a halt before a grand gated estate. The driver pushed a button, and the gates groaned open. Claire felt her heart racing. Unbeknownst to her, a world of surprises awaited her arrival. Yet she was certain of one thing. Her mother had experienced a life shrouded in silence. At this moment, Claire was on the brink of uncovering the truth. The vehicle glided past the wrought iron gates, its headlights cutting through the heavy shadows as it neared an expansive mansion. Claire felt a sudden tightness in her throat. The grand estate before her was unlike anything she had encountered before. Lofty marble columns, enormous glass panes mirroring the starlit sky, and an atmosphere of subdued strength that sent a shiver down her spine. This was a richness that surpassed her wildest imagination. But what was the reason James had brought her to this place? What connection did this place hold with her mother? The vehicle came to a halt at the entrance. The driver emerged first, swinging the door open for James. Claire paused, her grip on the strap of her purse growing firmer. Every instinct urged her to retreat, to flee before she found herself ensnared in a web of confusion. Yet her mind drifted to thoughts of her mother, the existence she had always kept to herself, the truths she had concealed. Claire compelled herself to venture outside. The evening atmosphere was heavy with the aroma of newly mown grass and an elusive hint of something more. There was an echo of recognition, yet she couldn't quite identify it. James strode forward, his steps assured as he guided her toward the imposing double doors. He cast a quick look over his shoulder. You can find solace in this space. Though doubt lingered in her mind, she chose to follow him regardless. The doors swung open silently, unveiling an interior that matched the grandeur of the exterior. Lofty ceilings, ornate chandeliers, a marble staircase spiraling elegantly to the upper level. However, what captivated Claire was the grand portrait that loomed over the fireplace. Her mother. Claire felt a sudden tightness in her throat. The oil painting was monumental, vividly portraying every nuance of her mother's face. The gentle warmth reflected in her gaze. Her expression radiated determination. But what brought it to this place? Who was the artist behind it? She glanced over at James. What is this all about? James moved in, his gaze locked onto the portrait. This residence was owned by your mother. Claire felt a sudden twist in her stomach. That cannot be done. My mother never experienced wealth like this. James faced her, his expression a complete mystery. Because she sacrificed everything. She turned her back on this existence. Claire experienced a wave of dizziness. What is the reason? James paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. For your safety. Claire's hands shook slightly. From where? James let out a breath. From the individual who stripped away all she held dear. The individual who sought to bring her downfall. She understood that as long as she remained, he would never cease. Thus she departed. She crafted a fresh existence, distant from everything that once was. Claire's heart raced with intensity. Who is that person? James's jaw clenched. Victor Langston is still on the hunt for you. Claire sensed the earth tremble beneath her. Who, me? James gave a slight nod. Your mother was the sole individual who ever dared to confront him. With her departure, you remain the final link to the existence he sought to obliterate. Claire dismissed the thought with a shake of her head. That seems illogical. I am merely a server. This does not involve me at all. James's expression grew somber. Your involvement in this is greater than you might think. Should we delay our actions, he will track you down. A chilling unease settled over Claire. She arrived seeking clarity, yet all she encountered were deeper mysteries. Who is Victor Langston? What had he done to her mother? And why, after all this time, was he still searching for her? It was evident. Her existence had transformed into something that extended beyond her individual desires. Claire sensed the mansion's walls tightening their grip around her. The atmosphere was heavy, stifling, as she struggled to comprehend James's words. Victor Langston, a name that was entirely unfamiliar to her. Yet it now bore an unsettling heaviness. She wished to convince herself that James had made a mistake. This was entirely unrelated to her. Yet, beneath the surface, an inner voice whispered that he was indeed correct. The manner in which her mother had consistently kept a watchful eye on her. The unwavering dread reflected in her gaze each time Claire inquired about the past. The existence they endured, perpetually battling, never finding peace. Everything had been meant to remain concealed. She took a deep breath. What is it that he seeks from me? James wore a somber expression. Utilize. Retribution. He devoted years to undermining your mother, seeking to strip her of everything she held dear. Yet she would not yield to him. He can still inflict pain on her through you, the final fragment of her being. Claire felt a wave of unease wash over her. She yearned to flee, to break free from this haunting ordeal. Yet, there was no destination in sight. She found herself right at the heart of it all. James advanced a step nearer. "Pay attention to what I have to say. Time is of the essence. Langston has been searching for you since the passing of your mother. He believes you possess some knowledge." She shook her head, a wave of panic swelling within her chest. "I am completely in the dark. This all came as a complete surprise to me until this evening." James's jaw clenched. "It holds no significance for him. He will come for you regardless." Claire's breath became faint. She found it hard to accept that this was truly happening. Just hours ago, she had been serving tables, fretting over gratuities and her rent. Now she found herself being informed that a formidable figure sought to track her down. Her hands tightened into fists. "What should I do now?" she murmured softly. James's eyes fixed intently on hers. "Remain in this place. This residence is safeguarded. No one can enter without my permission." She surveyed her surroundings, absorbing the majestic walls, the watchful security cameras, and the immense scale of the location. It resembled an impenetrable stronghold. Yet, even the strongest strongholds may succumb. "I can't simply conceal myself indefinitely," she remarked. James paused, contemplating his words with great care. "Another possibility exists. We actively seek out Langston instead of simply waiting for him to arrive. Our first stop is him." Claire felt a sudden jolt in her chest. "Are you suggesting that I should face him?" James gave a slight nod. "We move ahead of him, discover his desires, seize the reins of the scenario before he has the chance." Claire was utterly astonished by the words that reached her ears. "That is absolutely unbelievable. He possesses great strength." "Perilous." James's gaze deepened with intensity. "I feel the same way." For the first time, Claire understood that James was more than merely a billionaire CEO. Something deeper lay hidden beneath the surface. A presence that is both icy and methodical. She was unaware of the link he had to her mother. However, one thing stood out distinctly. He was ready to shield her. "What motivates you to assist me?" she inquired. James paused briefly. "I am forever indebted to your mother in ways I cannot fully express. She rescued me once. Now it is my moment." Claire felt a sudden tightness in her throat. So much remained a mystery to her. Yet one thing remained undeniable. Her mother had been fleeing from a force far greater than she could have ever conceived. Now it was Claire's moment to confront it. She inhaled deeply, suppressing the fear within her. "Very well. What are our next steps?" James's lips formed a tight, straight line. "A trap was set by us. We will ensure that Victor Langston poses no threat to you ever again." A chill coursed through Claire, sending a shiver down her spine. There was no way to retreat now. In the softly illuminated study, Claire's thoughts whirled as James unfolded the strategy. Every part of her essence screamed that this was utter insanity. Pursuing a man like Victor Langston felt akin to stepping directly into the lair of a lion. Yet what options were available to her? Concealing himself would not lead to his vanishing. Running would merely portray her as fragile. If her mother had dedicated her life to protecting her, then Claire needed to summon the strength to carry on the legacy that had begun. James bent forward, his keen gaze fixed intently on hers. "We must convince him that you possess something he desires. Something significant enough for him to show his true self." Claire's expression darkened. "However, I do not. I have no idea what he is pursuing." James let out a slow breath. "It is of no consequence. What counts is convincing him that you truly care." A shiver ran down her spine. They were venturing into perilous ground. "In what way?" she inquired with a hint of uncertainty. James slid open a drawer and retrieved a polished black folder. He gently pushed it in her direction. "Your mother possessed great intelligence. Before her vanishing, she had left behind a trail of encrypted files, financial records, business dealings, and evidence of illicit transactions. She never revealed their hiding place, yet I am certain they are real." Claire felt her heart race. Do you really believe Langston is interested in those files? James gave a slight nod. For years, he has been on a quest to find them. Should he be convinced that you possess them, he will seek you out. According to your preferences. Her fingers lingered above the folder. And what unfolds when he discovers that I do not? James's demeanor shifted to one of icy detachment. At that point, it will be inconsequential. Claire took a deep breath. This was far more than a mere game. They were challenging a man who shattered lives without a second thought. Yet, as dread consumed her, an alternate feeling emerged. Fury. He had stripped away everything from her mother. Now he desired to bring her along as well. She was determined to prevent that from occurring. She squared her shoulders. Okay, where do we begin? James cast a quick look at his watch. A message was sent out. A meticulously designed disclosure. A whisper of nuance, crafted to resonate with those who truly listen. Claire observed him as he typed rapidly on his laptop, each movement deliberate and methodical. In just a few moments, the message was dispatched. A trail of breadcrumbs for Langston to pursue. They sat in anticipation. The minutes stretched endlessly, a palpable tension hanging in the atmosphere. Claire moved restlessly around the room, each noise causing her heart to race. As the first light of dawn began to emerge, James's phone vibrated with a sudden buzz. He cast a quick look at the screen, his jaw clenching in response. It was successful. Claire hurried to his side, glancing at the message he was reading over his shoulder. A solitary message arrived from an unfamiliar source. It's time for a conversation. James locked his gaze with hers. He fell for the trap. A shiver coursed through her body. This was the moment. At last, the time had arrived. James stood, clutching his keys tightly. Prepare yourself. We will be meeting him in 1 hour. Claire's breath caught in her throat. There was no way to retreat now.